Ever since Devaughn Vele's departure, Utah has been in search of their wide receiver one, and they could be narrowing that search down. Plus, some Utah players have been balling out in the NFL. We're going to discuss it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's all caps, no spaces, Locked On College. Terms and conditions do apply. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Dante Guardi of UteZone. And Dante, when talking about Utah and their need at a wide receiver position, it is something that it may be the number one need on the roster at this point, because they've addressed the secondary stuff. And obviously, even with the Jaquindon leads, right? You get an Anthony Woods in there, you feel good. But there's no obvious replacement to Devaughn Vele on this roster and currently. And I think that's where a lot of fans feel like that's something Utah needs. Now, yes, they did add a pass catcher in Carson Ryan, but still waiting for that receiver to come in on the outside. And, we just had Mikey Matthews officially commit to Cal. We'll talk about that more on tomorrow's show. But it is something that Utah, it's like, okay, when are they going to get this receiver? And while they don't have anyone yet, it appears they could be getting close, because On3 has them projected as right now it says 100%. I don't know if that's actually what it will end up being, but a former 4-star receiver in Tayshawn Lyons, who is now rated as a 3-star receiver, but still has all the length and intangibles. And the only reason he fell basically in the rankings is because he decided to transfer from Washington, who had the best receiving trio in the country. So I would be very much excited about adding a guy who oozes that 4-star potential coming in. And the other guy is one with more experience in Jaylen Johnson, who at the moment he's 53% projected to UCF and then 46 to Utah. But I think both of these guys would have a chance to come in and lead this Utah team potentially. Even though Lyons is young, the potential he has feels like it's higher than anyone else in the room, so he might be able to come in and pop pretty quick. And then even looking at Johnson, he's a guy who's done it against SEC defenses. So I think either of these guys, Utah fans should be very excited if Utah can close the deal and add them to their program.
You look at Lyons and you take into account that he didn't have a lot of playing time, but you mentioned it. I mean, he played behind the best receiving trio in the nation. And you also have to take into account that he was able to learn from them and see how they operated, see how Michael Penix Jr. also operated. So, I mean, he's been in the mix of a fantastic offense, and that'd be a great addition by all means. And then Jaylon Johnson, you look at 3 touchdowns against Alabama in 2 games. That's a big game player right there. And, I mean, you look at the film, too, he's pretty explosive. I think that's an addition. And like you said, SEC defenses, that's a lot of great experience, a lot of great football played. And coming to the Big 12, Utah next season doesn't really have the strongest schedule. This is a schedule that a lot of people see Utah going 11-1, maybe even 12-0. And you've seen Utah top 5, top 6 in preseason. If they can get an X receiver and really find a guy to solidify himself as the alpha dog in the receiving corps, that might just be what Utah needs to get over the hump and really make an impact in the 12-team playoff next season.
Yeah, it does feel like it's the last kind of big piece needing for them to justify the high rankings that they've been receiving. And like we said, I think a lot of people are like, why hasn't Utah added a receiver? Well, this is always going to be a team that runs the ball first and foremost. We were even talking about how much we saw a retro version of Utah basically this past season, Dante, before you and I even started recording. And with this Utah team, you're never were going to get the top receiver. So it's not surprising to see that a lot of these other guys have gone to the more pass-happy schools, because if you want to catch, off the top of my head, like if you want to have over 1,000 yards receiving, if that is your number one goal, Utah's not your place to come. But you can still get close to that with an experienced guy like Cam. Like this past season, Devaughn Vele around 600, just 2 years ago, he had 700. I think it's reasonable to expect with Cam and him having another year. Devaughn potentially could have gotten to 800 this year had Cam Rising been healthy. That also depending on the Brant Keithy share, but there's still opportunities at Utah to catch passes and make big plays. Hence why I've always felt like Utah is going to eventually get someone, because even though they aren't the most pass-happy team, hence why they haven't gotten the best guys, there's value in being the top receiver on a Power 4 team, and that is still what Utah provides. So yes, they're probably not going to get the Silas Boldens of the world who got an offer from Utah, but he's not even going to take a visit there. But look, getting any of those two guys would be good. As for some other names, look, I know some people have been bringing up Trejan Bridges still. I think his future is still, there's a lot of other things that need to be worked out off the field, I think. So that's why I don't want to comment too much on that right now. But there's still guys like a Dorian Singer out there, even a Dante Cephas, a Tyron Smith, where there's still names in the portal. I don't feel like Utah has missed out and it's like, oh, it's only going to be Money Parks, Micah Pittman, and and then the last guy whose name I'm just Munir McClain. And there we go. Just came to me. It feels like there will be some other player brought into the fold for this Utah team.
No, 100%. And like you were saying, I was thinking about more like just pass catchers in general, and even just playing for Utah having a lot of primetime games, being make an impact. You think back to what Dalton did against USC a couple of years ago, and he was the closest pass catcher Utah had to 1,000 yards, I think, in recent history. Barrington in 17 got really close, or he might have actually gotten it. But outside of that, Dalton was the only one remotely close to it, and he made a massive impact against USC, and that was the game that really put him on the map. And while Utah is not going to play against USC, there's still going to be some very high-profile matchups. You take a look at Arizona. That was a team that ended the season on an absolute tear. They bring back a ton of talent. When Utah plays Arizona next season, it'll be a massive game. Utah could possibly go to the Big 12 championship, 12-team playoff. There's plenty of opportunities for these kids to make impact. And if somebody can have a game remotely similar to what Dalton did against USC, that will shoot their name like crazy up draft boards. So that's another entertaining poll for Utes potential receiver. You mentioned Dante Cephas. He's extremely good. I mean, there's a plethora of fantastic receivers in the transfer portal. And I mean, even if Utah doesn't land either of these two guys, there's plenty of other great options. And I don't think that we should really be stressing this in January when there's so many more months of transfer. You don't really know how it's going to play out. So it's not the end of the world if Utah doesn't land either of who are their top two guys at the moment, because there's still so much more time.
So even the second wave in the spring, we'll still get all these guys post-spring ball are going to be looking for a new home too. So still lots of things to figure out, to your point. And you're absolutely right about high-profile matchups. I expect the Big 12 this next year to be, well, outside of obviously Texas and Oklahoma are fantastic, but the other teams that are compromising the Big 12, they should all be better. We expect Oklahoma State to be the same. They should be ranked in the top 20. Kansas, if everyone stays healthy for them, they're another one. Could they be in the top 20? Kansas State, they've been a little more consistent. Yes, they just lost Will Howard, but still some things that they've done positively too. You feel like there should be some other games, and you already brought up Arizona. As long as Shedeur Sanders is on the field, even if Utah and them match up later in the season, that game is going to draw a lot of eyeballs, because Colorado will at least, you think, get bowl eligible with a quarterback of that talent coming back. Some of the things they've made along the offensive line, but I expect that game to matter even more. But definitely feels like there's still some big games to be played on Utah's schedule, and opportunity to ball out in those big games and get noticed, as these guys, of course, all do eventually hope to go off to the NFL. So it's going to be something that's going to be interesting to continue to monitor, is what Coach Whitted does at the receiver position, what types of players Andy Ludwig is going to be able to bring in and add to this offense as they do. They're always going to say, like, our goal is to be more explosive, and I don't think they're ever going to be this crazy throw it all over the field team, but there's things you can do, and it should definitely be better next year with Cam Rising coming back for Utah. And Dante, you already brought up Dalton Kincaid and just the sensational moments we saw him make at Utah just last season. And then this year he's been doing his thing at the NFL, and he's not the only one. I want to talk about some of these Utes in the NFL, and not just their individual success they're having, but also just how great it is for Utah that these guys, whenever the NBC promo goes up and it's like, where'd you go to school at? They're saying the University of Utah, talking about all the positive benefits that can bring. That is something I want to dive into in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all a little bit more about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, and our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question: what's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it easy and the best place to hire. In fact, hiring is so easy that they have many qualified candidates. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might have the time and resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is here to make the process quick, intuitive, and easy. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, all caps, no spaces, to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Also, I want to talk to you all about another sponsor in our episode of Locked On Utes today. It's our friends at UCCU. Learn and Earn, the UCCU mobile banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate. Parents, they don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards to stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There is age-appropriate content for every member of the family. You can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so you can play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart youth banking program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. All right, Dante, talking about some of the Utes in the NFL, and you kind of hit the first guy I wanted to touch on right away, was a Dalton Kincaid, who finished with the most receptions by a rookie tight end in Bills history. Felt like he saved his best game for last with the performance he had against the Miami Dolphins. That, you know, the Bills already had gotten into the playoffs because of some of the earlier implications that day. But even like when the Bills woke up that morning, that was a must-win game, or else they weren't even going to get in. So for Dalton to bring it at that level on that stage, you've seen him over the course of the season continue to grow and evolve, and it's been so much fun to watch. And I feel like all the pre-draft hype that he had gotten, we really, as the season goes on, tends to be the case with the rookie. He's starting to look like that guy that sooner rather than later is going to be one of the 5 best tight ends in the NFL. And I'm just very excited to see him continue to get an opportunity to ball out in the postseason.
I remember when Kyle Pitts first got drafted and people were questioning on whether that was a good first-round pick because he went like 8th overall, I believe, because a lot of people were questioning the usage of young tight ends and how most of them come on a little bit later in their career. So to see Dalton have however many receptions he had, breaking rookie franchise record, that's just fantastic to see him getting used early on. You know the Bills were going to use him as a first-round pick, but that Knox injury midway through the season gave him the opportunity to showcase his skill set. And I mean, he did not disappoint by any means. Like you said, kind of saved his best for last in a gritty road win over a Miami Dolphins team that they would have had to play again the next week if the Dolphins had won. And now they have a much easier matchup against Pittsburgh. No knock to the Steelers, I guess, but it is a much easier matchup. And the Bills are a much better team than the Steelers. So they should have a pretty relatively easy first round, whereas they wouldn't have if they had lost that game. So it's good to see Dalton really showcasing his skill set and doing everything he was doing in, up on the hill here at the pro level. And it's crazy to see how far he's really come, because this was a guy who came to Utah during the COVID season 2020 from USD. Didn't even play much football in high school, if any. I don't think he was a basketball player. So, I mean, to see how much he's grown as just a football player over the past 4 or 5 years since he came to Utah and now is in the NFL, it's really amazing, honestly.
I remember when I was a student intern and I wrote a story on Dalton after we had the Weber State game back in 2021 at the time. That was that season. And, you know, didn't really think much of it. Like I thought would go beyond to go be a good collegiate tight end, but we didn't know he was going to become this guy who seems like sooner rather than later is going to have, he could have NFL sponsorship deals because of the amount of yards he'll be racking up at the tight end position of the NFL. So it's been so fun to watch his rise. And speaking of just Utah players balling out, how about the season that Jaylen Johnson's had? Was just named to the Pro Bowl for the first time in his career, 4 interceptions, including a pick 6, 10 pass breakups, 36 tackles. I'm not a Pro Football Focus is everything kind of guy when it comes to the PFF grades, but he has their top coverage grade and was also their top graded corner. He's had an incredible year, and so awesome to see him get that recognition of being named to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, one of the big things to take into account when looking at the PFF grades is the stats that they actually use to contribute to the grades. And if there's a lot of discrepancy, you're kind of like, maybe that grade isn't 100% true. But a lot of Jaylen Johnson's stats just completely back up all the grades that he's receiving. The completion percentage allowed, the passer rating allowed, all those sorts of things, the yards after catch allowed, all those sorts of things are really indicative of the season that he has had. And it's just been another amazing story to see. We all know how much of a highly touted recruit he was when he first got to Utah. He had an interception, I think, in his first Holy War. It was like his second game of his career. And then from there, it was cake. He had that pick 6 against Washington in 2019. Fantastic moments that Jaylen Johnson gifted Utah fans. And he did struggle a little bit throughout the first few years of his career. There were some here and there, but to see him finally bring it all together is just fantastic. And I mean, the Pro Bowl was undoubted. Nobody had any doubts about him being selected to the Pro Bowl. I think now it's just a question of if he's an All-Pro or not. I think he is a little bit biased, but I don't even think it's really a biased take. You look at the stats, it backs it up. He's just been playing out of his mind this season. I think he's a no-brainer for an All-Pro selection.
Yeah, I mean, even just off the top of my head, I think I felt like Sauce Gardner, he was fine this year, but nothing exceptional. Just the other corners when you scan around the NFL, Jalen Ramsey was hurt. He missed a ton of time. Xavier Howard's been hurt. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other corners off, at the top of my mind, but I think he's got a great case and hopefully he's able to make it as well. And while Johnson was named to the Pro Bowl, there was someone else named to the Pro Bowl alternate. It's everyone's favorite Britton Covey, who actually led the NFL in punt return yards on the season. He had 417, and in terms of average, he had 14.4 average punt return yards. That comes to us from friend of the show, ESPN 700's Porter Larson put that out there. So it's great to see Britton balling out, getting to see Tyler Huntley start again for the Ravens. We know what he can do. And I still feel like, I'm a Vikings fan, so I always think back to what Case Keenum did. We're watching what Joe Flacco's in the midst of doing right now. I still feel like somewhere, whether it's in Baltimore or someone else, Tyler Huntley's going to get his moment where he's going to take a team and help them get to the playoffs after a starter gets injured, because he's just that kind of guy who's able to step up in those big names. Other Utes who've been balling out. How about Zach Moss this season? Over 980 yards from scrimmage and 7 touchdowns. Talk about a team that was kind of entering a rebuild, and I think Shane Steichen's done a fantastic job there. But the whole Jonathan Taylor, the circus that was with him, was he going to play? Was he not? Zach Moss just churned out yards, and his teammate back at Utah and with the Colts, Julian Blackman, 65 tackles, 4 interception, 4 passes deflected. Just so many Utes balling out at the NFL level right now, which is just fantastic, Dante.
Yeah, speaking of Julian Blackman, he was having such a terrific season, and it was such a bummer to see him go down with another season. I think that was his third in his 4-year NFL career, and this was coming when he was finally kind of similar to Jaylen Johnson, just to kind of a lesser extent. He was still playing extremely good football, like I was saying, but just a really untimely injury during what was the best season of his career. Zach Moss, like you said, during the beginning of the season, he was fantastic. He was one of my biggest fantasy football additions. I was on the team every week, 15 to 20 points. It was automatic. So really happy to see that. And I mean, he was a guy at Utah that just carried the load and some, broke the touchdown record. And it was just that game that he actually broke the touchdown record. And Utah was playing Arizona State. It was Utah 21-3. It was a really sloppy game. And I think that was a kind of a reflection of his career at Utah. Every time Utah kind of came out sloppy and wasn't really 100% juice, Zach Moss carried the load and found a way to help the team get the job done. And to see him find success in the NFL is just fantastic, especially after not really doing that well in Buffalo. To see him find a home in Indy is just fantastic. And then even Eric Rowe last week actually forced fumble for the Steelers. So that was cool to see him get picked up by them midseason and make an impact for a team that has made a pretty nice run at the end of the season, make the playoffs. So a lot of the Utes in the NFL are playing some very good football, and it's fantastic to see.
They are. I mentioned Devin Lloyd, Garrett Bowles, Lucky Fotu. Every time I turn on a Cardinals game, he pops off. And look, I know Clark Phillips got mossed by Chris Olave, but still just a rookie. Good to see him out there getting those plays, those opportunities too. We know Braden Daniels is over on the Commanders, and there's a ton of other Utes that are going to be out there. And, as I kind of teased before we went into this segment, it is just that fantastic branding and a reminder of Utah is not just a place you go to and you win at college and you don't have an NFL future. That's not the case. There are guys on every position, even a Tim Patrick. I know he keeps getting these season-ending injuries, but we've seen him shine at the NFL level. So you literally have guys in almost every position that are stepping out and showing out at the NFL level. And what do those guys all have in common? They played at the University of Utah, where they were able to win in college and help get their skills defined and developed that helped them take that next step they were hoping for to the NFL level. And now Utah has their wall of NFL guys just continues to grow, which I think is a fantastic thing for this program. And as you mentioned, it's going to be interesting to see how these guys perform in the postseason, those of them that have those opportunity, and also just see if any of the other guys, like Jaylen Johnson, get into the All-Pro or any other awards and recognitions that these guys may get as the season winds down and comes to a close. But just fantastic to see so many of these former Utes showing out in the NFL. And speaking of showing out, the Utah women's basketball team continues to do that, although they did hit a little bit of a road bump with a loss to Arizona in overtime, 71-70. But before that, got a win against Arizona State. Want to talk about the season that they are in the midst of with all of you in one moment. But first, want to talk to you about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapped up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can also find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, and it's just the best way to find popular parlays, plus so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. And Dante, I thought you hit the nail on the head earlier talking about Dalton and the Bills being able to get a win against coming up to take on the Steelers. I almost forgot for a second who they were playing because I've just already chalked it up as an automatic win over there. We'll have to wait a little bit till we see any of the Ravens take the field. As we said, I don't know how much Tyler Huntley would play in that potential game, but yeah, definitely feeling good about this position that the Bills would be in to make some money on FanDuel. Is there any other NFL game you got your eye on this week?
Honestly, no. I haven't really looked at a ton of them. I was really just watching the Sunday Night Football game and seeing like the hypothetical scenarios of what would happen if who won. And I just knew that the Bills would play the Steelers if they'd won that game, and that's what happened. So that's really it. I honestly have not really looked at the bracket much, but I agree. I think the Bills are probably going to steamroll the Steelers. They'll win that game by like 14, probably. Not really steamroll. I'll say 24-10. Bills win.
Yeah, you got to give some points just because the Mike Tomlin factor, right? I'm with you, but it definitely feels like one that is still going to end up being a pretty lopsided loss. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel if you feel the same way about that game as we do. All righty, coming in to close this one out, talk about the Utah women's basketball team, currently 11-4, and losing Gianna Neepkins was a huge blow to this team, but still finding ways to win games. You look at what they did against Arizona State; they won that one 58-41 on the road, and it's a game too where we saw Utah. No one played exceptionally well. I mean, only Alissa Pili only had 8 points, but Jenna Johnson dropping 10, with Kendi McQueen dropping 12 there too, and defensively, outside of Brown going off for the Sun Devils, only one other player had over 5 points. So just exceptional defense by Utah. And in 3 of the 4 quarters of the game, Utah held the Sun Devils under 10 points. So just incredible stuff from Utah defensively, and Lynne Roberts and co going to work. And as I mentioned, the latter part of that trip, took on the Arizona Wildcats and lost that one 71-70. And that was a game where Utah really had a chance, but they let Arizona go on that run late in the fourth quarter where they got outscored 15-8. And then in overtime, 6-5, the Wildcats outscored Utah to take them down in that one. Alissa Pili dropped 18, but wasn't enough for this Utah team. But look, the Pac-12 is one of the most competitive and tough women's basketball conferences. Is it a fantastic loss to Arizona? No. But even they're 10-5. They're not a bad team. This Utah team still belongs in the top 20, which is why they still find themselves ranked to me. And I still feel like they're in a strong position to, once Gianna Neepkins got hurt, it's hard for me to say they're going to be a national champion contender, but I say that as well. They gave South Carolina everything they can handle, and Alissa Pili is one of those players that feels like she can be a March Madness star come that time March rolls around. So I'm not completely giving up on this women's basketball team as it relates to being maybe even a Final Four appearance. It's going to take a lot, but it's not out of the question. And obviously, they're still very much a contender to win the Pac-12 regular season, even with how strong the conference is, Dante.
Yeah, in strong conferences, the teams that find themselves traditionally playing the best, especially in sports like basketball when the season's a little bit longer, 18, 20 games.
Yes, it is.
It's the teams that play really good team defense and have a strong veteran presence to lead them down the stretch. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what Utah has. They play really great team defense, and they have a strong veteran presence and Alissa Pili. And it's not like this is just like a strong veteran presence. This is an elite player, one of the best players in women's college basketball. So, you have an extreme player at the forefront of your roster, as well as some camaraderie there, as you can see with the team playing just overall sound defense. So that's going to contribute to some success in conference play, I believe. A Final Four run, like you said, it would take a lot, but definitely not out of the question. Especially, like I said, those sorts of teams do well in March Madness as well. When you have a player to rally around and everyone is just kind of doing their job and knows their role. But the teams that have the most success in college basketball are the teams that figure out the role allocation the quickest. That's always the biggest question. That's why you see these teams that have a lot of transfers and whatnot. People get excited about them, but then they end up flopping. Why do they keep flopping? It's because they don't allocate their roles correctly. They don't know their roles. They don't really understand what their job on their team is, because they come in expecting the world because they're transferring all that whatnot. Like Texas a couple of years ago was a really good example of that. Yeah. They got 7 extremely good transfers. They were like top 5 in every poll. And they ended up doing well towards the end of the season. They caught fire a little bit, but like towards the beginning of that season, I think it was Chris Beard's first as the Texas head coach. They were pretty atrocious to watch on offense, and it was because their roles weren't really allocated properly. So this Utah women's basketball team has their roles allocated properly. They have a veteran present. They have a strong veteran to rally behind. And I think that's going to contribute to some real success in Pac-12 play as well as the postseason.
I agree. And they got a massive one coming up this Friday. Make sure you guys head over to the Huntsman Center. Utah is going to need the support because they take on the 8th-ranked Stanford Cardinal, who's always potent, as we know. And then they'll take on Cal on Sunday. And then even a week from Friday, you got USC. And then Saturday taking on UCLA, who's ranked 2. The road doesn't get any easier for this Utah team. And it's going to be fun to see how Utah will do against Stanford, a team they beat last year when Stanford made the trip out to the Huntsman to win a share of the Pac-12 regular season title, which was just a fantastic accomplishment to watch the team take care of business in that one. So it's going to be fun to see how they play out and continue to monitor not just the Utes in the NFL, but what Utah does in the transfer portal. And if people want more Utah news and updates, Dante, where should they head over to?
UteZone.com. Starting with the playoffs this week, I'm going to have a Utes in the NFL like preview listing where you can watch all the games, what the matchups kind of looking like, as well as on Monday or Tuesday following the last playoff game of the week. I'll have like a recap, kind of similar to what I've been doing over the course of the season, just going over what each player did and what you can expect from them going forward, or if it's the season's over, kind of a recap of just how they did over the course of this last campaign. So a lot of good stuff regarding the Utes and the NFL, and obviously UteZone's good for recruiting and all that as well. So great outlet to get your Utah athletics information.
Dante, we appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate you for having me, JT, as always.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We'll be back tomorrow talking about Bryson Barnes heading to Utah State and what it means that Utah will be facing off against him in 2024. We look forward to seeing you then.